Okay, so welcome everyone to our October Drupal London meetup. I'm Matt. I'm one of the organizers of the event, along with Rajiv, Andy, and Digby. So if you have any questions, anything at all, just let us know. A few things, there's snacks, there's drinks. Please help yourself. The toilets, if you need one, they're right through here. Um, let's see. And so yeah, so we're here at the Children's Society. I'm our developer here at the Children's Society. The Children's Society is a UK charity. We address the damaging decline in children's well-being and try to address the causes of that as well as the effects. And some of the tools that we use to do that are Drupal-based. So we're very happy to host tonight and to welcome the Drupal community. Tonight we're very fortunate. We have two talks. And then afterwards, we're going to have a quick chat. We're starting to organize a broader, well, I'd say a bigger event in 2025, a Drupal camp. We're just kicking off the process of doing that, and we invite you all to be active and to get involved. So our first sort of informal chat is tonight after the second presentation. If you'd like to join, please do. If not, we've got a Slack channel that will be picking up conversations there as well. Let's see. And we'll also be going to the pub afterwards. So I hope you can join us.
I really wish I could join you there.
Oh, exactly.
I got to get back to work.
We'll have a beer for you now. Let's see. Tonight we have two presentations. They're both really good and they're nice and varied too. So the second one, I'll just mention it briefly. We have Finn and Eeks. They're going to be talking about Drupal Local Gov, which is a distribution of Drupal, which is used by dozens of local authorities across England. It's a really interesting project, and I think you're going to enjoy the talk. The first presentation tonight, we have Dan and we have Katie, who I'll mention really, I'll introduce briefly. It's about the Crosswords module, which is one of my personal favorite modules in Drupal. I'm a big Crossword fan. And also I should say, again, I hope I'm not embarrassing you, Katie. We're lucky to have Katie Hale with us tonight. Katie's one of my favorite crossword constructors. She's put together a crossword for us as well. So it's got some Drupal clues as well as some other things that developers will enjoy. And there's also some really great wordplay. So just want to say thank you to Katie for donating the puzzle and contributing. It's really wonderful. And Dan has very graciously hosted the puzzle, and we'll be sharing a link to it a little later tonight. So yeah, I should introduce Dan. So Dan is a developer based in St. Louis. And again, he's set up the Crosswords module. And rather than me saying too much, Dan, I'm just going to hand things over to you. So yeah, over to you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inviting me. So my name is Dan Flanagan. My handle, Drupal.org and Drupal Slack and almost everywhere, is Dan Flanagan 8. And I am going to talk to you about the Drupal crossword module that I created. But before that, I want to tell you a few things about myself. Like Matt said, I'm from St. Louis, Missouri, USA, which is kind of right in the middle here along the Mississippi River. I'm always curious about whether people who aren't in St. Louis know about the Arch. We're very proud of our Arch. Could I get like a show of yays or something like that if you know what the Arch is? Or knows? Does anybody not know what the Arch is? Oh, that's good.
I think we all
A little bit of trivia. It's a hyperbolic cosine in shape, and it's exactly as wide at the base as it is tall, which I think is 632 feet or something like that. One of the exciting things about living in St. Louis is we're pretty close to Chicago, and I don't know if you all are excited about Oasis getting back together, but I am probably in the 99th percentile in America in liking Oasis. And I might get up to Chicago to see them when they come next year. We'll see. It's going to be expensive. So when I was giving this practice talk, one of my colleagues at the end, he said, "I just want to remind you that you're going to have an accent." And I thought maybe he was suggesting that I put on a fake British accent to try to make you all more comfortable, but he was just suggesting I speak slowly. So I'm going to try to do that. You don't want to hear my British accent.
Don't worry, we have a very diverse audience here.
All right, perfect. I've been a Drupal dev since 2016. I'm currently at an agency called Horizontal Digital, which is based out of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. We do mostly Sitecore work, but we're also building a Drupal practice. And our Sitecore team just created a presence in the UK. So I don't know, you might run into Horizontal Digital over there. We do have a pretty active blog with some cool posts about Drupal at horizontal.blog that if you're into Drupal blogs, you might want to check out. From the crossword angle, I was an amateur crossword constructor for a few years. It's getting to be a long time ago that I stopped really trying to do that. I was a professional for one day. I got one puzzle accepted to the New York Times, and I rotated my desk for this talk so that I could have my my credentials behind me, if you can see that. Also wanted to show this. This is other than the arch, the most famous thing from St. Louis is the St. Louis Cardinals, the baseball team. And here's a bobblehead of one of their famous pitchers from when they visited London in 2003. I think they played our rivals, Chicago Cubs. So that was
Sorry,
just a
Dan.
fun.
At the moment, your camera is not appearing on our big screen, so
Oh,
I'm just going to drag that across somewhere.
okay.
Sorry, do you want to re-show those bits?
Oh yeah, so these are my credentials. This is my framed crossword puzzle from the New York Times. And then this, I just wanted to show my bobblehead of when the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team went to London. And here's their famous pitcher dressed up as a bobby. So this is the kind of thing we think of when we think of London and the United States. So there you go. I posted the crossword puzzle, the first version of it, that's about 5 years ago. It's pretty crazy. And I was always working towards making my own website where people could post their own crossword puzzles that anybody else could play. And I launched that about 3 years ago. And I want to just show that off a little bit to show you what the crossword module can do. And after that, I'll show you how it does it. Any questions or comments so far? Does Matt want to throw anything into the conversation about St. Louis?
Was that Adam Wainwright who was in the?
That was Wayno, that's right.
Oh, nice. I missed that. That's really cool.
All right, so, oops, let's go to crosswordplayground.com. So as Matt said, there is a puzzle provided by Katie Hale that I uploaded here. This is what it looks like. I won't spoil anything here because it sounds like you might want to do it later. But I did notice that there was a question about Monty Python. And that got me thinking, where is it? I don't know. That got me wondering though, are there any other puzzles on the site that are related to Monty Python at all? And this is one of the fun things about Drupal is like once this puzzle is in Drupal, now we can like index it with the search API. And there we go. I found Cyber Cafe, and there's one more puzzle that mentions Monty Python. And you see here we have a teaser version of the crossword. We're viewing a node type here that handles the crossword. One of the cool features of the Crossword module is a submodule called Crossword Image that takes the uploaded Crossword file and derives an image file from it, and you can use that any way you would use a normal image. So let's look here. I'm going to try to find, I don't know the answer to this, but contraction memorably gasped by a bearded Michael Palin before the title sequence in Monty Python's Flying Circus. Does anybody know what that is? It's? That's it? All right, I can see if that's the answer. Yeah, I am showing errors. If I put an R there, say it shows up red. Cool, I can reveal the whole thing because I don't want to do that whole puzzle. That's a lot of work. We also have, we can tag puzzles, and I wanted to show an interesting tag for this group, which is the rejected by LA Times tag. So Katie, you're there somewhere. I don't know if you helped reject any of these, but these were all rejected by the LA Times. Some of them I think are quite good. In particular, one-letter clues and fittingly. So maybe you could do those and then kick yourself for not having run them in your publication. Okay, so that gives you a sense of what the module can do. I want to show you a little bit how it does it. And I'm going to do that by going to here. Here is an install I just did of Umami. It's just a local dev thing. And I'm going to add a crossword puzzle from scratch here. Show you how easy it is. I'm going to start by enabling the crossword module. There are a bunch of submodules, but I am just going to enable the core functionality. And that all comes from a field type that is provided by the module. All the functionality flows from that. So I'm going to add a content type that will have this crossword field. Call it crossword. I'm going to create a new field. Here's the crossword field type. I recently added this icon, and I was inspired to do that because I got invited to do this talk. So it was really encouraging. And that always, I find that happens to me a lot, is when I get feedback and praise of whatever kind from the community, it feels really good and is very motivating. So here's my crossword field. I do have some special validation options. I can pick which crossword file types I want to allow. And these are handled by a plugin system. There's a plugin for each of these 4 file formats. If somebody wanted to support additional file formats, they could do that. I think the file formats themselves are interesting. We're going to take a deeper look at that a little bit later. I don't really care though, so I'm not going to restrict it. You can also restrict the number of columns, either a minimum and maximum, and same thing with rows. On my Crossword Playground website, I didn't want anybody uploading huge puzzles because they were going to look terrible. So I capped it at 21 by 21, which is a typical Sunday puzzle. I don't need to worry about that here. So we'll just save that. Let's manage the display now. And I'm just worried about the full content. And I know I could use the default view mode, but I'm a big proponent of configuring the full view mode explicitly. So I'm going to do that because I'm running the show. Gonna get rid of links. So here's my crossword field. And the crossword module provides a few field formatters for rendering it. I can just do a link to the file. I can render the solution if I want. And here's the one I really want, which is the puzzle. This has a huge number of configuration options, although it's like the default configuration is pretty reasonable. And I think I'm just going to go with the default configuration, and maybe we'll come back and take a look. But there are a number of buttons where you can configure the text or configure if it displays at all. You can hide the clues if you think that that's not good UX for you. Just rely on the clues that pop up in the header. You can keep the solution from being public if you're trying to do something sophisticated and maybe make money with the puzzle. But here we go. I'm going to add my crossword puzzle now. This is my umami puzzle. And here's my puzzle just for umami. And there we go. Oh, I already did this in this browser, so it had that clue already in the local storage. So we like hardly did anything, and we have a totally viable crossword puzzle here, which I think is pretty cool. And was one of the goals is to, when I was making this, the idea was, I think we've changed from this, but Drupal was for ambitious site builders. And I think an ambitious site builder can do a lot with this. But one thing that jumps out at me is that, oh, did somebody say something?
No, it was just a cough. Sorry.
Okay. Does anybody want to say something?
Yeah.
I couldn't understand that. I'm sorry.
Can you show us the file that you uploaded?
Oh, yes, that's a great idea. All right.
I have a question for later.
I guess I can just.
While you're doing that, I have a question for later. You can just answer it when later in the talk when it's relevant. Will you be able to tell us about the sort of the JavaScript in the front end? Because it's obviously doing a bunch of front end stuff. So is it custom vanilla JS, or do you use some sort of framework or something like that?
Yeah. Okay. It is all custom. I don't know how good it is, but it works. I think it would be a great place for somebody to say, hey, I'm really good at React. I want to make this React crossword puzzle widget that can accept the data that, when Drupal parses the file, can accept that data and make it look really nice and give a great experience. Here is what the file looks like. This is the across-light text file. This is one of the files we're going to look at. It's by far the most human readable of the formats that I've seen, and so that's if I'm going to make one by hand. This is how I do it.
Sorry, can you zoom in a bit on that, or
Oh yeah.
just enlarge that slightly? That's much better. Lovely.
One of the interesting things in these file formats is redundant data. So there's a size here, for example, but there's also the grid, and I can, if I have the grid, I can derive the size. So I don't know why I need both of them, but they're there.
Would it be correct to say this format is not quite XML? It's sort of.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. Not quite XML. Like they're like things that look like tags, but not really.
Okay.
Sorry,
Hang on, another question.
so when you're creating this, you have to be counting the columns manually to know where you are. Like 21, then you know you're like in line 21.
Uh-huh.
You have to count the columns like that?
Yeah. But typically people don't author these by hand. They would be using an application that would export their puzzle. And Katie probably knows a lot more about this than I do. So people probably don't write these by hand. But if I write it by hand, I use this format.
Okay, great. Thank you. Carry on.
Okay.
Okay.
So one of the, here it is. All right, one of the things that stands out though, if we view this, is that the theming is not great. This blue doesn't really go with the look of the site. And that is something that an ambitious site builder could handle by using one of the submodules, which is the Crossword Colors submodule. And this is one that I would like to rebuild. It pretty much takes the approach of the Drupal color module, which I don't know if you've ever looked at how that works, but it's pretty funky. I think a modern approach would use CSS variables, but I can go in here and there are a few different colors I can set. And I wrote down a few colors that I found on the site. So there's this E6, E0 that shows up a lot of places. That's kind of nice. And then I'm actually going to make this the other green and see how that looks. 008068. I might not be able to read it, but we'll see. Now, if we go back to the puzzle, yeah, there we go. It looks a lot more like umami. Something I wanted to remember to say, and luckily I'm remembering right now, is that in 2021, I proposed a talk for DrupalCon about the Crossword module, and it got turned down. I was pretty bummed. And I think I think people could look at the Crossword module and think like this is kind of frivolous. This isn't serious. It was tagged as games and amusements. Like how is that part of like Drupal's core mission or whatever? But if we were to look at the project page now, and we can, games and amusement tag was recently renamed user engagement, which I think is a lot more professional sounding and important sounding and totally accurate. And why do newspapers have crossword puzzles? So that people buy the newspapers, so that people come back. And there are all sorts of content strategies that could involve a crossword puzzle. When I made this puzzle, one thing I did was to add a link in each of the clues. The green that makes soup great. I have no idea what that is, but I clicked the link and oh, it's watercress soup. And now since I wanted to do the puzzle, I've stumbled upon the recipe for watercress soup, and now maybe I'm like, I actually want to make that soup. And I think there are all sorts of creative things that people could do. There's a submodule that gives you a framework for a crossword contest where the solution is not public and there's a submit button. And after you've filled out the puzzle, you can press submit and it'll tell you whether you're right in a modal or wrong in a modal. And you could do all sorts of creative stuff with that. I suggest having a coupon code. Who knows? There could be a web form in that modal, and you could, I'm not a content strategy person, but I know that creative people could do creative things with that stuff. And I'd love to see that. Let's get back to the presentation and look at the file formats unless there are any questions or comments before we do that. There are like services you can pay for to embed crossword puzzles in your site, but having this tight link between managing the content and Drupal, I think allows you to do more interesting stuff with the content. Also, it's free. One of the services that I know of is called Puzzle Me from Amuse Labs, I think. And it starts at like $500 a month, and a lot of places, especially charities and things like that, don't have $500 a month to throw around for something like this. And if you were to look at I found a list of websites that use this module. Links to real sites, and a lot of these are they're not big corporations or anything with lots of money. So Ending Racism USA have some, this is a cool use for crossword puzzles. They probably don't have $500 a month to give to Puzzle Me. Oh, deja vu all over again. Matt probably knows what this is, but this is a quote from St. Louis's favorite son, Yogi Berra of New York Yankees fame. He's famous for having all these kind of funny yogi-isms, they're called. But I think it's appropriate because we're going to look at the same file over and over, or sorry, the same puzzle over and over and over in different formats. Here's my little test file. There are a lot of test classes in the module that do tests against this file. Actually learned most of what I know about writing tests while making this module. Here's that across light text. Across light is kind of the industry standard. I don't know if it has an official affiliation with New York Times, but it's certainly unofficial. There's also a binary version of this across light format, the .puz, and this is really confusing. Probably the best thing I've ever done as a programmer is figuring out how to parse this. I'm not sure how I did it. There's like a million null characters here as well. I was young, and so I thought I could do it, and I did it. I would never try to do it now, I don't think. There's a lot in addition to like everything that's here, clues and the grid and being able to put a circle in the grid and being able to put more than one letter in a square. This has additional things like your progress on the puzzle can get saved. If you're doing this in the application and you need to leave, you can save your progress. And that includes like whether you've used pencil to fill out any squares. It includes how long you've been working on the puzzle. So there is more that can be stored in here, and we don't, the plugin that parses this file doesn't care about that data. It ignores it and just goes for the data that it cares about. Crossword Compiler is an alternative to a Crosslight, both as a file format, but as an application. And I think you can go online, you can search for Crossword Compiler and get an account and construct puzzles and export them. And you can do a lot of really sophisticated stuff with these. You can give lines and squares colors. We don't support that currently. You can use background images. We do support that. That was a fun one. But this is real XML, obviously. Whoops. Maybe the most interesting format, though, is this one called iPuz, and this is an open source specification. I think it's owned by a company called Pizzazz, but it's open source, it's free to use and to extend and all that stuff, and really goes along with the Drupal open source mindset. This is JSON, obviously. And this, I mean, you can support a lot of things here. You can probably support background images. I don't have that incorporated. But regardless of the file that's uploaded, the Crossword module parses the file and gets it into a common data structure, if you want to call it that. I'm looking at it right now and I wonder how, like, why it ended up like this. But each of those puzzles would get parsed and turned into something like this. There's a lot of redundant data here, and I think that's because I wanted to make the JavaScript really easy to write. There's some references that are in both directions, for example. If clues contain references to other clues, those get parsed and added here. I can show you that here. So this text is 5A, has a reference to 3 across and 1 down, and it tracks those references and can display those however you want. And that's a good segue into one of the things I regret. And regret, I don't think is a bad thing when we're talking about development. It's just, you know, reflection. If you don't regret anything, it means you haven't reflected on anything, I think. And if I had tried to do everything perfectly, I never would have gotten anything done. But that's what versioning is for. And if I were to make another version, this probably won't ever happen, but I would look towards embracing iPuz as maybe using that schema in the internal representation, that parsed representation. Certainly, it'd be cool to be able to export any crossword puzzle as an iPuz file. And given that it's JSON, I don't think that'd be too hard. And the parsing itself, one of the dirty secrets is that it doesn't happen just one time. None of that metadata is stored in the database. It's parsed and then cached, and that cached parsed version of the file is used as long as it persists in the cache. But if you clear the caches and then look at a puzzle, it will parse the file, it loads the file and parses the file again. And clearly that's unnecessary for a stable module. For a module that was in constant flux, it was pretty good because I didn't have to write any update scripts, update hooks to like mess with database tables. I just clear the cache and everything works. But I wonder if I really went all in with media, or maybe the crossword, rather than just being a field type, should be its own content entity. I don't know. I haven't thought about it too hard. This would be a nice one to have a discussion with somebody about. I would also like to improve the crossword image plugins. When I showed the teaser versions of the crosswords, like when we were searching for Monty Python, that little thumbnail image is created by these crossword image plugins, and there are 3 plugins that ship with this. There's that blank thumbnail. There's one that has numbers for the numerals in the grid, and then one has the solution. But they're not configurable. I think it would be cool if one could configure the color of them or the font or who knows, all sorts of things you could imagine configuring. I never did that. Also seems like a place where SVGs would be a very good option, given the geometry of this, very geometrical. And I've never done anything with SVGs within this module. So that would be a cool place to go. And I mentioned earlier, I would like to modernize the Crossword Colors submodule to do something with CSS variables, which are widely supported now. I don't think in 2019 that was something you were really supposed to be doing. And get rid of the current approach, which copied off of the color module, which has been removed from core for multiple reasons. And I want to go back here and say a few more things about the community. I mentioned this before, just getting invited to give this talk really gave me a boost. It gave me the motivation to add that icon for the field and to add an icon or a logo to the project for project browser, things like that. But over the years, there have been over 40 issues submitted by community members. And these aren't issues like coding standards violations or, your dependencies are declared wrong in your .info file. These notorious ones. These are like real substantive issues. And I say over 40 issues because I don't know the exact number due to the fact that sometimes an issue would be reported and I would split it up into multiple issues. And so it looks like I created these issues, but really they came from the community. One of these community members gave me a couple patches. Most of the other people are not really into the code, but they still provided so much help. Finding the bugs obviously is helpful. They shared the websites that they were working on, which helps me see how people might use it. And it's also just fun. It motivates me, makes me feel like I'm not wasting my time, that somebody else is getting a benefit from this. They were also generous enough to let me add their crossword puzzle files to the assets in the testing code base, so that if they had a file that revealed a bug, I could write a test case against that file. And that's certainly not something they had to do, but they were generous. And all the kind words, once again, very motivational. And that's it. I'd be happy to look at the JS a little bit if that's something that there's interest in.
Anyone want to? Yep, we seem to want to have a go for the JS, please.
Okay, so I am going to, I think the way I'm going to approach this, I had not prepared for this, but I want to show you this website, 500foods.com, that did some really cool stuff with the puzzles. Let's go to, is this the one? This one's so cool. Okay, so let's clear this. So this is one with embedded images. Anytime I do anything, there are events that are triggered, and just about everything on the page has an event listener. And let's see, so the way that these know they should be read is that there's some key press listener that compares the entered letter to the letter that's in the Drupal settings and adds a class that then the styling can go off of. Let me stop sharing. This is, let's see. All right. Oh my gosh. Why won't it let me drag this? Trying to get the code up here, sorry. There we go. All right. Been maintaining view field the last few days. Oh man, I'm not good at sharing the code and making sure everything is really visible. The JS is split up into two files. There's one that I called classes that is supposed to create these objects. They might not really be, I don't know how JavaScript does with classes. They're not really classes. But it creates an object for the crossword, an object for each square in the crossword, an object for each class, and these all have references to each other. The crossword itself has, oh, we're looking at a square. So a square knows the crossword it belongs to. It knows its row, its column, its fill, its answer, its numeral, its across clue, its down clue, all these things. And there are various functions you can call on a square. You can say, does it have an error? Is it correct? Is it empty? Is it black? It's the last letter of a clue that affects what happens when the user gets to the last letter. A clue knows its text, its direction, its numeral, its references, and once again, there are methods you can call on it. Does it have an error? Is it complete? Is it correct? I worked really hard to get this to work with screen readers, and I think it's pretty effective. I've tried it. I can do a puzzle with my eyes closed. So that's what this get aria current string is for. And then the crossword, it's gonna know what its grid is, what its clues are, and this, I guess, is the one that the other file interacts most closely with. So when the page loads, it gets the crossword data, that parse data, out of Drupal settings, and it passes that data to the constructor here. And when making the crossword, it's going to go through and make the grid and make the clues. Making the grid makes all those squares. And after that crossword puzzle exists, it goes through and adds a bunch of event handlers to the various elements. And from there on out, everything is just like triggering events and listening for events. Now, I do want to show in the crossword contest module, there's a different JavaScript file, and this uses those same classes, but it sets up event handlers and things like that in a different way. So that was the idea of breaking up the classes and the crossword into different things. It's basically, this is the UX and this is the data structure. So the crossword contest, it uses the same data structures, but has different JavaScript for the UX. So I don't know, that may have been part of what you were looking for. It may have been worthless. Does anybody have like something specific they wanted to see in the JavaScript?
No, I think that's really useful. Thanks, Dan. Any other questions? Yep.
Hello. So I'm just wondering what made you decide that you wanted to parse an existing crossword puzzle instead of like allowing the user to input or create their own crossword from like a list of words and clues. Of course, I don't really know the complexity of like the second option. But
Yeah.
just wondering if you thought about that.
So my thinking was that so Drupal is a content management system, and I just wanted to do the content management part of this, where like the content exists, it's this file, and we want to upload it, and we want to allow people to view that content in different ways. There are already a lot of applications that you can use to create crossword puzzles, and they're definitely better than anything I could make, but there was not anything in Drupal for hosting crossword puzzles in a real Drupal-y way and using all the Drupal systems that we know and love. So I think that answers the question.
Thanks. Any other questions? Yep, Rachel.
Thanks. I might scare you now, but if you were to have the crossword puzzle drawn in SVG, quite possibly would this mean you'd be able to have non-rectangular puzzles?
You know, that is, some of the formats support non-rectangular puzzles, but we do not support the crossword module does not know how to parse those puzzles.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if you were to upload such a file, what I would expect to happen is that you'd see a message that says something like, we couldn't parse that file. It looks like a crossword compiler file, but it may be corrupted or have features we don't support.
Fair.
That's very similar to that.
Hmm. And as far as you're talking about media entity and making those, that's a great idea. I did the same with maps and GPX files and making those so they're a media entity. And it's really useful, really useful.
Yeah, and I would like to store the clues in the database so that I could use those with views and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that media allows you to have the metadata as
Separate.
Is that right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can make as
Yeah.
many fields as you like. Yeah.
And there's a submodule, crossword media, that includes what's a media source plugin for the crossword field. It doesn't do any of that metadata though. The only fancy thing it does is it allows you to configure the thumbnail really easily.
Hmm.
So that could be a place to go, is to really expand the usage of the media API.
Great, thanks. Anyone else questioned? Yeah, go for it.
Since you've done working on the the crossword, do you have a plan to work like extend this to like Sudoku games?
I do not. Uh,
At this stage,
On Crossword compiler, so I wonder if you could make a compiler file of Sudoku and put it on and see what happened.
it would not be good. So this was written really thinking about crossword puzzles. I don't think it's nearly general enough. And in fact, originally there were some very tight couplings between the logic and that a Crosslight text file format that I showed you. For example, the lowercase letters in the grid indicate that there's going to be a circle, and like that was coupled really tightly. The puzzle description it calls notepad, and that's what I call that description in the internal data structure, even though none of the other file formats would call that notepad, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like it should just be description. That's what it is. Calling it notepad is really coupling it too strongly to this one file format. So I really think that extending this to support other things would be hard. I think it would take a complete rewrite. But the iPuzz specification that I was talking about does have specifications for other types of puzzles. So there could be the like iPuzz module that tries to support all those the puzzles of those types. Now I do think that crossword puzzles have a unique ability to like be part of a content strategy in a way that Sudoku is not. Like maybe a word search could as well, but probably not even that. Like the interplay between the answers and the clues and the fact that you could potentially link to things and general popularity. I do think there's something kind of uniquely powerful about the crossword puzzle in a content strategy, let's say.
and if it's any consolation, I created a module called Puzzles back in 2013, and unfortunately never got around to uploading any code. I've got one. I think I got around to writing a skyscrapers module or skyscrapers game for it, but the idea was to make it sort of like one of these multi-game puzzle things, but it never quite happened. So I congratulate you in actually making it happen.
I know, because like this is what I was saying earlier, is like you can't if I had worried about making it perfect, it never would have happened. Here, I'm gonna share my screen again because I did want to make my own project from scratch, but I did due diligence, trying to make sure I wasn't duplicating effort within the community. There was this sandbox that I found at the time, and still a sandbox, but this is more about creating the puzzle within Drupal, as somebody suggested. Look at that. There's a widget for creating that puzzle. I don't know if that's pretty cool. But once again, I felt like there are already really good options out there for creating puzzles. That's not the project I wanted to work on. I wanted to work on the content management aspect, rendering those puzzles in interesting ways.
Great. Any other questions?
Can I ask a quick question? Knowing nothing about any of this really. A lot of people still really like printing out crossword puzzles and using pen and paper on them. Is there a way to print out the puzzles in a nice way, the way like a Crosslight will print it out in a nice format for solving?
So I know that this puzzle will print out nicely. We're looking at, oh, sure. Okay. This puzzle will print out nicely. It does it more like what you'd expect in a crossword puzzle book where it puts the across clues over here and the down clues over here. I wonder, I've not checked this, so this is totally live. What happens if we print it out on the Umami? There is a print style sheet that comes with the module. Let's see how good it is. All right, more settings. Background graphics. There we go. That's not bad. It doesn't look great when there are only 10 clues or whatever, but the closer it gets to like a 15 by 15 newspaper puzzle, it does look pretty good in a printout.
Great. Yep, another question?
Hi, when you're showing us the JavaScript class, there was an ARIA function. I was just wondering how difficult was it to make these crosswords accessible to things like screen readers and keyboard navigation?
So initially I had two separate field formatters. That there was one that was really accessible, but it didn't look much like a crossword puzzle. And that I think was really accessible, but kind of missing the point where it was too much work to, like, realistically, were people going to use this formatter and link from the like standard formatter to the accessible formatter? No, they weren't going to do that. So I did rethink it. That original accessible formatter didn't hijack any JavaScript, or sorry, didn't hijack any keystrokes. So like it let all the default browser keystrokes do their default things. So this does, hijack all the keystrokes. But last time I tested it with, I don't know, the standard Chrome screen reader, it worked really nicely. And when, let's see, if we look at that ARIA, where is it? Okay, so when you're at the beginning of a square, of a clue, I guess, that's the square that has the ARIA text. And what it'll say is it'll say the clue, and then it'll be like blank, blank, X, blank, blank. Which I think is pretty good UX for it, but it's accessible to me when I close my eyes. I don't know if that means it's accessible to somebody who's doing it for the first time. I wish I knew somebody had tested it. I don't. But when I tried using crossword widgets that I found on other sites, they did not work well with a screen reader in my experience. So I do think that this is better than most things out there when it comes to doing the puzzle with a screen reader.
I think we're going to leave it at that, Dan. Thanks very much.
All right.
We've got another couple of talks to do, so we're never going to get to the pub at this rate. There's so much good stuff.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.